Hello,
Ba-ba-da,
everyone.
ba-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-bum, ba-ba-da-bum, bum. All right, Indiana Jones, hello.
We already cut each other off. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Outside the Letterbox. Today, we're going to be discussing Wes Anderson films and top it off with a discussion on his latest, The Grand Budapest Hotel. But first, you can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox on our website, the-letterbox.com. You can find us now on iTunes by just searching for Outside the Letterbox and on Feedburner. Today I am joined by my co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hey, I'm Nick.
And we have a special guest with us today, Wes Anderson enthusiast, our friend Alex Patton.
Hello, everyone.
So we're going to start off today just by really quickly talking about what we've watched recently. So I'm going to throw it to Joe.
Alrighty, so I know the topic of the day is Wes Anderson, but quite honestly, I've had a lot of things going on this past week, a lot of changes in work, and I was out without a computer because the cat chewed my power cord. So I haven't watched a whole lot of Wes Anderson movies this past week, but I did get around to seeing one of my favorite action movies, Aliens. James Cameron Aliens, obviously the sequel to the original, and I also watched Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers, which is kind of fitting. I think that I watched both of those this past week, considering that Starship Troopers borrows quite heavily from Aliens, and they both kind of have a different take on the bravado of kind of the space marine sort of thing, you know, fighting these alien bug-like creatures. Obviously, Aliens is more of a grounded, straight-up action film with really great characters. Sigourney Weaver, I think, is excellent as Ripley, and all the movies, but especially Aliens there with their connection with Newt. And then Starship Troopers, more controversial in the fact that it's more of a comedy, and I think a lot of people don't quite realize that. So it's really interesting just to kind of rewatch the two of those movies back to back, since Starship Troopers does borrow so heavily from Aliens.
Okay, great. I love Aliens. I think we all love Aliens, and Starship Troopers is a fun one to watch. So I'm going to throw it to Nick now for Need for Speed.
Yeah, so this past week I watched Need for Speed. We had an article that I wrote that went up this past week about Need for Speed and kind of the, not genre, but kind of the trend of bad video game adaptations. Didn't talk a whole lot about the specific movie, but I think the article kind of brought up a lot of the problems that Need for Speed has. The biggest being that Need for Speed, the video game, doesn't really have a lot of characters and a lot of plot. So it's kind of an interesting movie to try to adapt into a movie. So, and because they don't really, I think the script isn't really that great. The characters aren't that compelling. It kind of just comes off as like a second-rate Fast and Furious. That being said, the action is kind of incredible. It was all shot live action, practical. Real cars being flipped and smashed and crashed, and so no CGI stunt work there. And it was directed by, I don't know if you guys saw it, by the same guy who did Act of Valor, which apparently also suffered from not the greatest script in the world, but a lot of people loved the realistic action. So it's kind of, this movie's kind of in the same boat as that. That being said, like Aaron Paul, obviously this isn't his best performance, but he's really likable in the movie. And so I think her name is Imogen Poots, which is the greatest name for an actress ever. But so they both come off okay in the movie. But otherwise, it's good, it's fun, but it's kind of disposable entertainment at this point.
Yeah. So Nick, I actually have a quick question about Need for Speed. I read an article probably a few weeks back that was saying that the film was they released it in 3D, even though they weren't originally planning on it, because the film director, Scott Waugh, I don't know how you pronounce his name, W-A-U-G-A. Yeah, he shot it as kind of like an 80s esque kind of a macho car film. So I was wondering, do you see it in 3D, and did you notice anything about the cinematography that seemed kind of reminiscent of the 80s?
No, I didn't see it in 3D. As for the 80s vibe, probably the most 80s thing about the movie is the movie poster, which is actually kind of great. That being said, the plot kind of has a very basic, 80s revenge plot to it. In terms of the actual cinematography, there are a couple of like nighttime neon light sequences. So like I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Thief was a huge '80s movie that like inspired Drive. So there are kind of some nuances like that, but it's not a huge element of the movie.
As I understand it, it's not really fair, or what I've heard is that it's not really fair to compare Need for Speed to Fast and Furious because they're trying to do very different things as movies. Is that accurate?
I mean, I guess I don't know. Like Fast and Furious has a lot more fun in it, and you kind of, I feel like you go to a Fast and Furious movie to see the crazy action, but also I feel like at this point in the Fast and Furious franchise, people kind of like those characters, and this movie to me was, it has the action. I think that kind of, even if it's not as over the top, it's more realistic. I think it still delivers, but I don't know, the movie tonally felt like it was trying, too hard to be serious, and at the same time trying too hard to be like funny. There were a lot of forced, like, I guess, bro humor moments, which do not work in the movie. There's one scene in particular where a guy leaves his job to hook up with his old friends back on the racing squad, and so they start playing a cover of Aerosmith's "Back in the Saddle" again, and he slowly starts like taking off his clothes and eventually just strips till he's butt naked, running around. And it's just like I don't know what was supposed to be funny about it, but it was kind of weird in the middle of like this macho action movie to have this guy prancing around an office butt naked.
What I guess all I'll say before we move along is just I've heard a lot of people talking about this movie in comparison to the Fast and Furious, but they talk about it as if the first Fast and Furious movie is really, really good. And
yeah, Fast and Furious 1 is, actually, really not that many of the Fast and Furious movies are actually that good. But I mean, like, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
All right. So anyway, Alex, what have you watched recently?
This past weekend, I actually watched American Hustle for the first time. Kind of late in getting around to that. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I could see why it was nominated for Best Picture, but at the same time, I didn't really have all that much fun watching it. I felt like of the characters in the film, there weren't too many that the audience was supposed to like. I mean, I liked the character Christian Bale played. I think he did a really great job in acting that. I almost feel like at times forgot that he was Christian Bale, and I saw him more as the character. But I mean, like I said, I thought it was a good movie. It's interesting. It's got some great twists and turns that keep you interested throughout the entire thing. But I just didn't really feel connected to any of the characters, to be honest.
I think
the funny thing about American Hustle is that the characters I think really are the things that stand out about it. I saw it back when it was in theaters, and it's, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't terribly impressed. I mean, like, it was fine. There's nothing really wrong with it. It was just kind of fun, I guess. Yeah. In a way. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because a lot of the actors really got into the characters and just kind of ran away with them and just weren't afraid to kind of get a little loose and fast with their performances. The one that stands out to me, though, even though he's not in the movie a whole lot, is Louis C.K.'s performance. Especially his ice fishing story, which they never. It's funny because they never really pay that off, because they bring it up a few times and he tells you a little bit more of the story. And you have to try to guess at the point of the story, and the movie just kind of forgets about it like 3/4 in. So I thought that was kind of a fun way of looking at it.
They actually apparently shot an ending where he reveals what happens in the ice fishing story, but it didn't really work out, I guess, in terms of the whole movie, so they cut it.
I think that everything Louis C.K. is in, he is the exact same person. So I was not entertained in any way to see him in the movie. But I did really like American Hustle as a whole. I agree with Alex. I think Christian Bale really stood out, just because I didn't feel like he was Christian Bale. Amy Adams was kind of Amy Adams. Jennifer Lawrence was great, but she also wasn't in the movie that much, so I don't know what the big deal was there. But I think I enjoyed it probably more than Joe and Alex. I just thought it was it was very entertaining to watch these characters try and be people that they clearly weren't. But you also, in a way, just didn't really know who they were anyway. But I guess I just found it entertaining. I don't necessarily think it was Best Picture material, but I think that it was a surprisingly entertaining character study. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, sweet. All right. So, unless anyone else has anything else they want to say, anyone?
Nope.
All right. We're gonna move on to our top 2 picks for Wes Anderson films. So, each of us is gonna talk for a minute or two just about what our 2 favorite Wes Anderson films are, and then we might have a chance after each person speaks. We might have a chance to or each person can sort of take a chance to basically talk back at them and say what they think about those movies or say why those aren't the best movies. But anyway, so to start off, we're gonna go with Alex since he is our guest.
Alrighty. Well, my favorite Wes Anderson movie is actually The Darjeeling Limited, and I know it's kind of not particularly one movie that Wes Anderson's famous for, or really well loved by a lot of people. But I thought it was my favorite. I mean, I really like the characters in the film, the 3 brothers, and then I also really like the setting. I like that he kind of went somewhere new with the movie and set it in India and set it on a train too, even that. So I like the kind of change of pace that he took with Darjeeling Limited. I mean, I like the music, of course, is the case with all of his movies, but I think I really enjoyed the change of pace and scenery, and then also the characters as well. And then second pick, I think second pick it's a toss up between Rushmore, which was actually the first Wes Anderson movie I saw, and that's kind of really what got me hooked. And then maybe even Grand Budapest Hotel. I really like that film.
Yeah, I think I like both of those a lot. I think we're gonna leave Grand Budapest out to talk about it until the end. Okay. But for Darjeeling Limited, I just wanted to say that the top 4 movies for my favorite Wes Anderson films are really tough to rank. And the Darjeeling Limited, I really love. Like you said, I love that interaction between the brothers, and just a lot of the technical things about that movie. There are certain images that stay in my mind, like them running after the train in slow motion, is just awesome. But yeah, I think that's a really solid pick.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. My top 4, Darjeeling's in that as well, and it's kind of those are all very close to my heart. And the reason I love Darjeeling is it always reminds me of me and my brothers, even if these guys are pretty terrible people and they're almost kind of caricatures and whatnot. I think if you have brothers or if you have siblings or whatever, you kind of notice how they interact with each other and the different roles they have as the older brother as opposed to the middle as opposed to the youngest. And especially because I remember actually a year before coming out to college, I remember my brothers and I, we took a road trip from New York to Virginia to visit some relatives, and we broke down exactly the halfway point. So it wasn't quite like a spiritual journey through India, but there's a lot of just traveling with your brothers and kind of going through all these different mini crises and how you react to that. It's a very relatable movie to me, even if it is set in a different world and these characters are kind of bigger than life and very dark, broken people. I love that there's still something that is relatable at the very center of it.
Yeah. So, Joe, I actually think Joe has seen the least number of Wes Anderson movies of us. Is that right, Joe?
That is easily a very accurate answer.
So I don't know how much Joe is going to be able to contribute when we talk about each of these, but I'm going to pass it to Nick now. Nick, what are your top 2 Wes Anderson picks?
My top 2 are my top pick is Fantastic Mr. Fox, followed very closely by Rushmore. Rushmore is it's such a perfect movie. I mean, that script the dialogue in it, the characters. I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't really get it. And I think, if we were going off my first viewings of all his movies, it probably at the time would have been towards the bottom. But there was something watching it the second, third, fourth time that just all of a sudden clicked, and I got the humor, and I just feel like that pairing of Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray, they're kind of back and forth revenge antics towards each other it's some of the funniest stuff in Wes Anderson's movies. I mean, there's some things that I can try to describe about the movie, but really it wouldn't do it justice. Like, we'd have to link, we'd have to show people the movie or a clip from it to kind of give them what exactly we're talking about, because there's so many. The movie has a lot of actual visual gags, whether it's the tree falling over after their little conversation, or Bill Murray when he runs away from the teacher. It's just all these little funny moments. And yeah, the center of it, I love that it's actually kind of a really sad movie. It's both these guys kind of getting over grief and loss, which is something I've noticed a lot more when you watch a Wes Anderson movie. Even if you can watch it with a smile on your face, at the very heart of it is kind of these broken people, and I always thought that was kind of interesting. But my favorite Wes Anderson movie is Fantastic Mr. Fox. That was the first one I saw. It's probably the one I've seen the most, and so to me, it's a mix of Wes Anderson's usual talents, but kind of and also the use of the stop motion animation. To me, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up on a lot of stop motion movies, whether it was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Runaway Ralph, or Frog and Mr. Toad. And I don't know, I just have a real love and nostalgia for that type of animation. And I think Wes Anderson's style, if you watch Moonrise Kingdom or even Grand Budapest Hotel, those movies have kind of an animated quality to them. And I think this is kind of him using that medium to kind of explore themes that he has throughout the rest of his movies, but he does it in a way that kids and adults can understand. And I love that Wes Anderson, in order to tell stories about adults and kind of growing up and being a parent, doesn't need to make an R-rated movie all the time. That he can still get those themes across in an animated kids movie. So that's why it's my favorite, I think.
Yeah, I like Fantastic Mr. Fox a lot. I totally agree with you on Rushmore, except I think it should be higher on your list. But the Fantastic Mr. Fox, to me, it's very enjoyable. But I guess if you look at a scale for me of animated movies, and even if you look at a scale of stop motion animated movies, Fantastic Mr. Fox is below a lot of those movies, a lot of other animated or stop motion movies for me. And I think that's why I wouldn't put it that high, is because I think it's a great movie and it's very enjoyable and it's very Wes Anderson-y, but I don't think it's a very incredible or fantastic animated. And I think it's very good, but I guess I just never saw anything that amazing about it.
Yeah, I'll admit that there's a huge personal bias towards it. To me, it's the epitome of a fall movie. As soon as the leaves die and start falling, this is the movie that I throw on and watch, 2 or 3 times from the end of September to the end of November.
Yeah, that's fair. It definitely is a very fall-esque movie. In fact, a lot of Wes Anderson movies feel like they should be watched in fall, and I think that just might be that they're so yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Paul, I'm curious because it sounds like it's not going to end up popping up on your list. You mentioned that Fantastic Mr. Fox, it isn't as far as stop motion movies go, just kind of stop motion animated movies go. It's not. You've seen better. And I was curious. Out of stop motion animated films, what would you put as kind of better movies than that?
As better movies than Fantastic Mr. Fox, I would put Chicken Run. I love Chicken Run. And it's funny because these tend to be much more personal, biases, as opposed to maybe them being, and it's probably because I think about them less because they're animated movies, which that's more of a detriment probably to my character than anything else. Maybe I should think about them more, but I like Chicken Run a ton. And I think something like Dude, there's so many that I would put above Fantastic
Yeah.
Mr. Fox. Like, I would put Frankenweenie above Fantastic Mr. Fox. I would put, let's see, a Paranorman above Fantastic Mr. Fox. There's quite a few of the stop motion movies that exist. Coraline, like it's tough. It sounds weird because I don't necessarily have an explanation for each of those.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is a lot of fun and it's very enjoyable, but there's something about it that I think is lacking in terms of entertainment meshed with a more complex theme that for some reason stop motion seems to lend itself to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. It's just kind of like it's almost not really an animated movie actually if you think about it, because I mean watching it, the animation stands out, but it's the sort of movie where it could have been made without animation. I don't know. It's a really interesting movie to look at just overall.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I think. And I'm not saying Chicken Run is particularly complex thematically, but there's just something about Mr. Fox that while I like it, I think there's a lot of stop-motion animated movies that I would rank above it. So no offense, Nick. Okay, sweet. Well, Joe, I know you haven't seen that many, but of the 3 that you've seen, what would you rank as your favorites?
Actually, you know what? I have to confess, I'd say technically I've only seen 2. I haven't seen Bottle Rocket all the way through yet, so...
You know, I'm actually going to go on that one. I haven't seen it either.
Out of the 2 Wes Anderson movies that I've seen, my top 2 favorites are The Darjeeling Limited, which I saw that one years ago, actually. I think when I watch certain directors, I tend to kind of marathon a lot of their movies. Which is why I haven't seen a lot of Wes Anderson movies, is because I haven't gotten around to a Wes Anderson kick yet. I mean, I know Nick, back when we were in college, we shared an apartment, and I know you went through a kind of a Wes Anderson spree at one point, and at the same time, I think I was going through a Andrei Tarkovsky kick, and then you know, when you were watching stuff like Steven Soderbergh, I'd be watching all of Stanley Kubrick's movies, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like, from what I've seen of Wes Anderson, I really, really like him. His style is really interesting to watch. It's different, and it's kind of has a fun, quirky quality. I'm going to try not to use the word quirky as much, but that's kind of the top adjective that comes to mind when I think of Wes Anderson. But the Darjeeling Limited, it's really interesting because that one is very character-centric, and I think a lot of Wes Anderson films, from what I've seen so far, depend on 2 things. One of them is their diverse characters, which it's weird that I say diverse because they all seem to have very similar aspects in that they're kind of bland in a way, but they all have little tweaks about them that make them interesting in their own unique way. But then also they're very Wes Anderson movies tend to be very situational as well, especially in Darjeeling Limited, where it puts these 3 brothers on the train and they're going across. It's India, isn't it, in the movie?
Yeah, I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like it's a combination of putting these 3 characters who kind of have their own very different personalities, putting them together in this situation, just traveling across this country and seeing what they get into while they're trying to kind of connect with each other over the course of this trip. And it's funny because one shot in the movie that stands out to me in particular isn't a shot that you'd think of when you think of a Wes Anderson movie. It's a shot where I forget what the context was, but there's these characters on a roof and they're looking for someone else in a crowd, and they kind of point off across the crowd, or the camera zooms in, but it's like an actual zoom in, which you don't see a whole lot in modern day movies, because a lot of times the camera likes to push in and put you in the environment. This is like a very obvious, like a telescopic, like the camera just kind of zooms in, like any other kind of that you would do, like adjusting the lens of the camera or something like that. It was just kind of funny and kind of stood out. So it's Wes Anderson, I think, from what I've seen, he really likes to kind of play around with the rules of cinematography a lot with that and do kind of unconventional things all the time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I totally agree. It's very different, but also in some way kind of bland.
Yeah, which isn't a bad thing, I think. I love dry humor if it's done well in movies, and Wes Anderson does dry humor really well. I think, I mean, like, for instance, I really liked The Informant back when that came out. I remember I got together a group of friends to watch it, and I was like, oh, guys, we're going to watch The Informant. You know, we got the DVD, brought it in, turned it on. I think I was the only person who stayed awake for that entire movie. And Wes Anderson has a very similar kind of, I think you have to get his humor to really enjoy them. It's a sort of humor that lends itself very well to different kinds of films, which brings me to my second Wes Anderson movie that I've seen, Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I think is probably the one that most people who have seen a Wes Anderson movie have seen that one, even if they don't know who he is. And it's funny, Paul, that you mentioned, because I know we were talking about kind of in terms of a stop-motion movie. I think as far as animation goes, stop motion is one of my favorites to watch. I know I had an article I posted this past week about the merits of stop motion as used seriously as a special effect. But besides that, I really love stop motion films. They're very different. There's something almost homemade and artistic about them. You know, like the trailer for the Box Trolls coming out soon. I love the animation from what I've seen in the trailers of that, and the character models. It looks like they were lovingly hand-painted and all that kind of stuff. It's just really great to see kind of some artistry going into the animation, you know? But for Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's interesting because I think it's because of Wes Anderson's kind of dry humor and the fact that he puts it into a movie filled with anthropomorphic animals that makes it really, really funny to me. I absolutely love the heck out of that movie. It's, I mean, like, for instance, and, like, there's just, like, little touches. Like, at one point, I remember there's these human characters, and one of them's playing a song, and then the guy stops in and says, "You made a bad song." And just the way he delivers that song is just hilarious. And so I think it's because of his dry humor, and the fact that it's put in an animated film about talking animals, that just something very endearing about that. And I don't think it would be too much to say that as far as stop motion animated films go, that one's probably up there as one of my favorites. Along with, for instance, I really like Chicken Run a lot as well. That was a much different kind of movie. Aardman Entertainment does very different, more conventional, I think, sort of movies than Wes Anderson does.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that brings it to me, and my favorite, or my second favorite Wes Anderson movie is The Royal Tenenbaums, and I was very disappointed to see it ranked so low on Nick's list. I think he's crazy because I'm pretty sure it's one of, at least from his earlier films, it's one of his best. It's better than Life Aquatic for sure. I definitely think it's better than Bottle Rocket. The only reason only one it's not better than would be Rushmore, which is my number one. But the reason I love The Royal Tenenbaums so much, I think, has a lot to do with sort of each character is incredibly interesting to me, and the fact that they're all part of one family is, like, for some reason really speaks to me. Like that's although they're all sort of caricatures, that seems extremely real to me. That they're all caricatures, but they're all part of the same family, and it's all sort of about that family dynamic. It's sort of a dysfunctional family, if that even exists. But they, you know, they're all very much part of this family, and in a way, they all do sort of love each other. But they are all so incredibly different, and the whole Royal Tenenbaums, I think Nick said it in his article, is probably one of Wes Anderson's darkest movies. It's very dramatic, and I think a lot of the humor in it, I think all of Wes Anderson movies, all of his movies are funny, but the humor in Royal Tenenbaums, a lot of it comes from just the characters. Like Margot Tannenbaum is so deadpan and so, like, non-emotional until the end that pretty much everything she says, I can't help but laugh at, because it's so, she's like a perpetual moody teenager, and I think it's hilarious. And then, you know, you get Ben Stiller's character, who's just, insanely overprotective of his kids. And then Gene Hackman is great. He's just sort of ridiculous. And I think, Nick, I think we talked about this a little bit, where there's a sorry, there's somebody yelling outside our apartment right now. Yeah. So we were talking about how the main characters of a lot of Wes Anderson's movies seem sort of obsessive, and in a way, Gene Hackman's character Royal Tenenbaum is that character in this movie, where he is incredibly possessive of his family and obsessed about them being his family, and he can't really let that go, even when his wife, who has not been his wife really for many years, becomes interested in marrying someone else. And so he lies and he cheats his way into trying to be part of this family again, rather than doing what he would really need to do to be a father. And that seems to be a theme reflected in a lot of his movies, where these characters are sort of putting on this kind of show to get what they want. And some of them I think are more like genuine characters than others. They're more honest characters, but Royal Tenenbaum is not one, and I think those characters interest me more for some reason. So anyway, now that I've talked too long about that, I'm going to talk about my favorite movie of Wes Anderson's, which is Rushmore. And again, it's one of those characters who's so obsessive and possessive that he just really wants this girl, or he really wants to stay at this school, and he can't let it go. And I think there's just something about that really speaks to me. And also, Rushmore is like the perfect balance of a sort of a realistic setting and Wes Anderson style to me, where it's not too out there or too crazy that it's distracting. This is a Wes Anderson movie, but the story is also and the characters are compelling and interesting enough that they shine through the movie and shine through his style, and what happens in it is so funny, but at the same time so genuine and so heartfelt that you can't help but sort of be in love with those characters. And Royal Tenenbaums was actually the first movie I saw by Wes Anderson, but Rushmore was the second. And I was like 15 or 14 when I saw these movies, and I did not fully understand them for sure, and I don't think I fully understand them now. But there's definitely, when I saw them, I just remember thinking, man, there's something really interesting and really cool about these movies and this style that spoke to me. So anyway, now that I've written my love letter to Wes Anderson, what do you guys have to say about that?
I think we were talking about
I think
Alex, go first.
Okay.
Yeah, Alex, go first.
Well, I just want to know is I think Rushmore was kind of, or I view Rushmore as one of these Wes Anderson's movies before he really started to have his own style. I mean, you could definitely see it in Rushmore. I mean, just the character interactions between Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray, you can definitely see that, and that Wes Anderson is developing his style. But I guess this is before he really kind of his style really fully developed. And so I think it's kind of an interesting way of seeing before he really, before like Royal Tenenbaums and before Darjeeling Limited and everything else he's done. But you mentioned how it was a good mix of like Wes Anderson's style and then kind of the real world. So I thought it was just interesting that being one of his first movies, he had that mix of real world and his style before he really kind of fully developed it. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, and what I'd say to that is, and I think I actually at least plan on talking about this for the Grand Budapest Hotel, is that, and I think it happens a lot in The Life Aquatic, where his style and his sort of flair and finesse on his movies, to an extent, can be very distracting, and where the movie doesn't feel like what's happening or what these people are going through is real anymore, and it feels more like like a storybook. And Rushmore to me, he does that a lot. Like even in the Royal Tenenbaums, it's like you're reading a book because he has chapters. But Rushmore to me is a nice balance of that, where it's still what's happening still feels like it's actually going on, and these people feel real, even though they're kind of funny and ridiculous. So.
Yeah, I can understand that. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was reading an article a little bit ago about Grand Budapest Hotel, and it was just saying how, I mean, the movie is really just about Wes Anderson movies, how it's just further developing his style, and so yeah, like I said, I mean, it's interesting that Rushmore kind of includes a little bit more of the real world, and it's not his style, Wes Anderson's style and his flair isn't so distracting.
Yeah. All right. Did anyone else have something to say on that, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, since I had Royal Tenenbaums solo on my list, I feel like I need to say something. But my reasons are more personal, not like if we were ranking his movies in terms of like artistic accomplishment or whatever, then like by all means, I would have Tenenbaum right at the top. But to me, it just doesn't connect with me on a personal level until the very end of the, like in terms of like an emotional moment, until the very end of the movie when, spoiler alert, Royal dies. Because before, I don't want to call it white people problems, but it's hard. Like to me, it's watching the movie and you're watching all these terrible things happen. Like Richie cuts his wrist and stuff, and it's all really terrible. But I don't feel emotionally invested until that very last bit of the movie. And I don't know if it's because just like I don't know people, who have, been on that level. Most of, my siblings we're kind of just getting into that age bracket and whatever. And I don't know, just it's not until the very end of the movie that I actually feel like, oh, like that hits me. It's always unexpected too, because the whole 2 hours before, like it's very enjoyable and I like the movie a lot, and then in the last 5 minutes I wind up getting hit by this emotional wave over Gene Hackman's character dying. And so that's my big thing. It's mostly just the emotional connection. So like who knows, maybe 10 years down the road, I'll have a completely different opinion on the movie, and it'll jump to the top of the list. It's the same thing kind of with Life Aquatic, because Life Aquatic is about a guy, kind of going through a midlife crisis after he lost his best friend. It's like I don't know what that means. I enjoy Life Aquatic a lot. I think it's funny and whatnot, but I don't have the emotional connection to it that I do for say the rest of his work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to move us along, I believe, into our last section of the podcast today, which is going to be a review and discussion about the Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson's most recent film. We're going to start off just talking about our general reactions to the movie, and then in the last bit we'll get into spoilers and we'll have a bit of a warning before that. So first off, I want to toss it to Alex. What did you think of the Grand Budapest Hotel? Oh, also, sorry, real quick. Joe hasn't seen the Grand Budapest Hotel, so he might be asking us questions or, talking about it a little bit here and there. But just saying that he may not have a fleshed out opinion on the movie. So, Alex, what did you think of the Grand Budapest Hotel?
I really liked it. I mean, when we were talking about our top 2 picks for Wes Anderson movies, I mentioned that one. One of the reasons why I liked it a lot is it's just a really entertaining movie. I was talking with Nick about this after we first saw it, and I kind of related in a way to movies like Scott Pilgrim, where there's almost always something going on, and so you're not ever distracted, or you never really lose interest, because there's always something new that's coming in that's going to keep you interested and keep you watching the movie. So that's really one of the reasons why I really like the film, just because there's always something to see, there's always something new. I mean, it's got his typical style and flair, so that's really great. And it's I like the setting of it a bit. It's nice. I mean, there's nothing too particular, it's just a different setting and for the movie. But overall, I think yeah, I really liked it. And like I said, it's probably one of my top picks for Wes Anderson movies now.
Sweet. All right. Nick, or actually, it's my turn, I guess, isn't it? I really enjoyed the movie. I think it was hilarious. I think it was there were parts of it that were making me like cringe and actually like grip my seat in fear. And we might get into that a little bit more in spoilers, but it was a very entertaining movie. And I'd also say this might be, with the exception maybe being Fantastic Mr. Fox. And Moonrise Kingdom. Although no, I'd say this is more recommendable to almost everybody. I think this is just a really entertaining movie as a whole, and very surprising too. For some reason, I was not expecting sort of the intrigue and like, it's not like an action movie, but it sort of feels like almost like a James Bond type deal where like you've got a hitman chasing after people or something. Where it was just surprisingly entertaining, and I guess sort of surprisingly modern story for his style. And I thought it was really cool that he managed to make a story like that work for his style and still be entertaining and scary at parts. And yeah, I just think it was a great movie and definitely one of his more easily recommendable films to people. It's not one that you have to like qualify beforehand, like the humor's kind of different. It's like once the movie started, you get what kind of movie it's going to be. So that's I guess my opinion on it.
You know, Paul, I actually do have a question about it. So I heard that supposedly like during the movie, the aspect ratio changes several times to portray like different timelines or different times that are portrayed in the movie. And then just for me in general, from what I've seen, like from the poster and some of the trailers, I'm getting kind of almost like an early 30s or 40s kind of Technicolor film vibe. Like the poster reminds me a lot of something like Black Narcissus, whereas I'm sure it's a very different kind of story. It feels like it's the sort of movie that borrows a lot from that era. Is that accurate? Would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Nick, what would you say?
So this is what I was trying to figure out when I was watching the movie, was because there would be certain images, and I'd be like, that reminds me of something, and I can't figure out what it is. I would agree with Joe. Black Narcissus, I think, was, if not, at least on a subconscious level, is an influence. But I would even go that there are references to old German black and white silent movies, like stuff that maybe like Fritz Lang or F.W. Manrau, something like Nosferatu or something like that. Even just like subtly, like the way I made this joke to Alex yesterday, which is that someone should cast Adrian Brody and Willem Dafoe as vampires, because in that movie they are terrifying.
Yeah.
They kind of have this, Adrian Brody's hair is all done up and he's wearing all the black, and there's a part, not spoiling anything, but he's following someone, and it's so tense, and it's just like this guy is like Count Dracula or something like that. Yeah, I would say probably old Hollywood movies from the 20s to the 50s. I think they're all different moments that you could pull references from those different decades. And actually, the one thing, the aspect ratio for the actual hotel, which is the closest to a full frame ratio, reminded me a lot of The Shining, because Stanley Kubrick was notorious for demanding that on home video all his movies be put in full screen presented. So none of his movies were in widescreen on home video for the longest time. And so whenever I think of The Shining, I always think of that aspect ratio. And so just being in a movie, movie set in a hotel with that aspect ratio remind me of it, even if it wasn't Wes Anderson's intention at all.
Yeah, so Joe, the way the aspect ratio is used is the film actually starts in modern day, and starts is a strong word. There's like one shot in modern day, and then it goes back to 1985, I believe, and then it goes back to like 1960 something, and then it goes back to 1930s, and the 1930s is where most of the movie takes place. And then by the end of the movie, it works its way back to modern day. It's actually a really interesting structure, and I think it really works in the end. Initially, I think it's somewhat confusing, but by the end, it makes sense. So.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting, huh?
So, Nick, you really like the movie? I guess that's
Yeah,
what you.
I thought it was really enjoyable. If we're talking about like where we would put it on our list, that's kind of the part that I'm kind of debating with because I love the movie so much, but like if I had to put it on my list, it would probably be in the now number 5 slot. Just below Darjeeling Limited, I think above Bottle Rocket. But I think saying like that makes it sound like a disservice to the movie, which is actually really enjoyable. I think it's one thing we get out of Wes Anderson's movies is whether it's your least favorite or your most favorite. Like the difference between each place is actually can be pretty minuscule at
And
times.
it's interesting that you put it there because I'd probably put it in the same spot. And Alex, you might have something to say against this, but that is actually my critique of my one critique of this movie, and it's more just a personal preference thing. And my critique of, I guess it would be a critique of his most recent films, is that as he gets more and more stylistic, and I guess just gets more freedom as a director because his movies have been more and more successful. Um, I feel like his stories feel less and less, feel more, or I guess feel more and more like just stories as opposed to things that could have actually happened. Moonrise Kingdom really worked for me because it was about children, and I felt like the style fit. The style almost made it feel like one of the children was telling the story, which was really cool. And for the Grand Budapest Hotel, as entertaining and as interesting as the story and what it's saying is, I think didn't feel real to me at all, and that's probably what he was going for. But I personally prefer something like Rushmore, where it's got his style, but it doesn't. The style is not it's not the most entertaining thing about it, I guess,
Yeah.
or it's
But
not
that
made
being said,
feel
that being
unrealistic.
said, the movie is really, really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's why it's like it's hard when you're talking about in the rest of his movies. It's like, there are 4 of his movies that I probably think are better out of 8 movies, so it puts it in the middle. But it's like if this were anyone else's movie, it would be one of their best movies. Um,
right.
but kind of something to get out before we get into spoilers is Ray Fiennes is incredible in this movie.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Like he's known primarily as a dramatic actor. I know at least
no,
Paul
he's
and I
not
are big
primarily
fans.
as Voldemort.
Yeah, well, I know Paul and I are big fans of his work in Bruges, which allows him to go darkly comedic. So I think it's great to just see him kind of go. I guess this is as close to full-fledged comedy as you can get without being, mainstream. And he's fantastic. He's probably the best. It's probably the best performance in the movie. Is Ray Fiennes is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about, just kind of respond to Paul, what you were saying, is I actually, to be honest, I kind of like when Wes Anderson kind of has more freedom with his style, and I think that's why I kind of starting to like more of his newer movies where he's had more freedom. Because I mean, I do like his movies like Rushmore where it's more real, it's more of a real story, but I think I enjoy watching like Grand Budapest Hotel a little bit more, just because I feel like it is a story, and I feel it's a little more entertaining, and I really do like Wes Anderson's style and the way he does his films, and so that I think the more freedom he gets, I seem to like his movies more, just because I really like his style, and so the more he's able to get away with, the more I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I would say that's why I think the Grand Budapest Hotel might be his most easily recommendable to date, other than Fantastic Mr. Fox, because it's just so entertaining. Beside like with his style, with the humor, and like you said, I totally agree that. I mean, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and I was like, we were trying to. We were kept whispering to each other, "Oh, did you see that? Oh, did you see that?" And like neither of us had seen it because we were looking at something else while the movie was going on. And there's so much going on in the movie that it's you could watch it again and find a new joke happening, while you're watching it, which is pretty great. Um,
Yeah.
so
To kind
anyway,
of go off
oh
to
sorry, go
kind of
ahead.
go off what Alex was saying though, when I said like a huge thing I love about his style is kind of his childlike sensibility, like, you know, I think I said this in my article, it's like my childhood memories kind of grew up. Like, you know, these characters listen to things that I listened to growing up. You know, their stories are based off, you know, stuff that writers that I read growing up wrote. And so I think that's a huge reason why I kind of really like his last three movies, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest, is because they all kind of feel like they're more and more part of something that is somehow connected to my childhood, you know, whether it was viewing or reading a book or something like that. And I can't pinpoint exactly what that is, but I always love that feeling going into his movies, which is why, like, most of his movies, when I'm watching them, I just always have this huge smile on my face, even if I'm not, you know, laughing every minute or whatever. I'm just enjoying myself the whole way through. And so I think his style, and especially kind of, you know, some people would say it's kind of gotten to the point where it's substance over style. I disagree with that, but I think the style is a huge part of my personal enjoyment of that. So, yeah.
I think you meant. Did you say substance over style? I think you meant style over substance.
Well, or yeah. I think a lot of people think he puts style over substance. I disagree with that, and we'll kind of get into that in spoilers. But
okay, well, I think that's going to bring us into spoilers. So from this point on, we're going to be discussing spoilers for Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel. If you do not want the movie to be spoiled for you, you can skip to the very end of our podcast and find more of our podcasts on the letterbox.com. We are now going to be discussing spoilers, so spoiler alert, you have been warned.
Can I skip ahead to the end?
No, Joe, you're stuck.
Joe just has to leave.
You're going to miss your opportunity to call out your Twitter handle, so I don't know if you want to do that.
Okay, then I'll bear through it.
Yeah, I just want to say that scene in the museum, like, I was legitimately scared. And it was goofy too. Like, the settings and everything were goofy, and I was legitimately scared. And then when Jeff Goldblum gets his fingers chopped off, I think I yelled in the theater.
Okay. I never thought I would be scared in a Wes Anderson movie. Alex can attest this. I jumped when they pulled the severed head out of the bag.
Oh, I think the entire theater jumped, honestly.
Because, like, we were in the front, we were in the back of the front, so the whole screen, like, in terms of my vision, like, I could see the corners of the frame, but it was like, that was my whole vision. When they just pulled that head out, oh my gosh, I jumped and probably let out some audible sound.
Well, it was funny too, because I I don't know what it was about that scene, but I was like, he's not going to show the head. He's not going to show the head. Oh my gosh, he showed the head. And then immediately you see it, and then you immediately laugh.
Yeah.
That's something actually I noticed.
Speaking of.
Wait, Alex, go.
Oh, sorry.
That's something I noticed watching the movie is there were so many times where something, like when Serge dies, when Willem Dafoe kills him, and he's walking out of the monastery or whatever it is, the entire theater laughed. And I thought there was just kind of it was weird because he just killed a guy. I thought it was just kind of
But there's just because Willem Dafoe looked so ridiculous with that incense, with the incenser and the robe. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think
Alex is all disturbed. Everybody's saying like, "Oh, it's hilarious," and Alex is like, "A guy just died, guys. You
don't get it."
You know what death made me laugh the most though was Jeff Goldblum's cat.
Oh my god.
And then when he's carrying around the dead body in the bag, it was too funny.
Yeah. One thing that I do think was kind of brilliant, just from a setting up standpoint, is the very beginning when the narrator, and this is a pretty big spoiler, so I was going to say it, when the narrator mentions that his wife Agatha, the Saoirse Ronan character, that she's dead. So the whole movie, I was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna kill her. Like, she's gonna die in one of these scenes. She's gonna die, and then at the very end, it's like she died from a disease 2 years later, and I'm like, dang it, like.
Yeah, that was a great turn because as soon as there's the moment where they're setting up that you think Willem Dafoe's character is gonna kill her, and she goes up to look on the roof, comes back down, and it cuts immediately to the headline of "Local Girl's Head Found in Whatever," and you immediately think it's her until they actually pull the head out, and you're like, oh no, it's
The girl with the
whatever
club leg.
Butler guy's sister.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of really fun stuff in this movie that I guess I was surprised at how sort of dark of a story it was, but also how fun the whole story was.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to me. I mean, like obviously, without having seen it, it sounds like a lot of the humor comes from the fact that it's kind of like it's a movie that's not focused on violence so much, so that when it does happen, it just kind of comes off as more startling and comedic. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of violence in it by any means, I'd say. There's some gunfights but there are some pretty gruesomely violent parts, but it does come off as somewhat more comedic and kind of gross. Joe, I think you will love this movie.
Probably. It sounds like I probably really will, honestly. It has a good chance of being my top 3 Wes Anderson movies.
I also think, especially after making Fantastic Mr. Fox, which was PG, and Moonrise Kingdom, which was PG-13, Wes Anderson really kind of, you could tell this is him finally getting out all his R-rated impulses again, because I love how in a Wes Anderson movie a character can drop the F-bomb and still sound so innocent, and it's so funny. Like, it's not, and it's never because, oh, he dropped the F-bomb, that's why it's funny. It's always because their use of cursing is kind of to make a point or make you realize how mad or how angry or frustrated they are, and it always, the actor always through their performance manages to really convey that in such a humorous way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's funny, like it's R-rated because you're watching. It's like, oh, like someone got decapitated and there's violence and even some subtle nudity here and there, but you kind of forget it in the moment because everything's so innocent,
Yeah. All right. So I think we can safely say that we'd all recommend the Grand Budapest Hotel to any adult. Any adult viewers who enjoy that kind of thing. But that pretty much brings us to the end of our podcast for the day.
Oh wait, I have one last comment, and this might get deep, so I don't want to get too far, but it was something I noticed, which is at the very end when spoiler, sorry Joe, they talk about Ray Fiennes' character after his death. Zero. I'm gonna paraphrase the quote, but it's something to the effect of, he was a man from another time, and then he kind of revises it and says, like, maybe he was a man who wasn't even from his own time, was trying to preserve something from the past. I was telling Alex on the way out, I wonder if that was kind of Wes Anderson reflecting on himself, because if you look at his movies, you could have stuck his movies in like the 30s to the 60s, and Wes Anderson wasn't born until the very end of the 60s, and I almost feel like that was kind of him kind of commenting on himself and his own movies and kind of what he likes to do, you know?
I would say it might be, but I don't, having listened to interviews with him and about him, I don't know that he would admit to that. Or that
no, I don't think he would. That's why I think he would say it in the movie instead, you know?
So, all right, so that brings us to the end of our podcast for the day. Alex, where can our audience find you online?
If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Alex D. Patton, Patin, but I don't really tweet much, so.
All right, you have a Tumblr too, right?
Yeah, it's what is it? Subtle as a Road Accident. Just from
nice. All right, we'll post a link to your Tumblr on the channel.
Cool.
Nick, where can people find more of your work online?
They can find me at Shout92 on Twitter, and then just keep following the Letterbox for any articles that I might write.
Great. And Joe?
And as always on Twitter, Credo Films. That's C as in Charlie, REDO Films. I'm also on Google Plus. I think you can find me there. And just follow us on the Letterbox. I'll be posting articles every week.
I think Alex is also going to start writing a couple articles for us.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention too. Yeah, I'm starting working on some stuff.
Sweet. And again, you can follow me at PFDuda on Twitter, and you can find more of my articles on theletterbox.com. So once again, you can find more of our episodes of Outside the Letterbox, as well as articles and film news on on our website at the-letterbox.com. You can find our podcast on iTunes by searching for Outside the Letterbox and on Feedburner. And tune in next week where I believe we'll be reviewing and talking about the biblical epic, or maybe not so much, Noah. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
All right.